Great, so yeah, it's great to be here. It's been a fascinating morning. I think that opportunity to hear from people from a whole range of different specialities has been, really interesting so far. It'll be a bit of a lull now for a few minutes. You can have your after dinner sleep, but then it'll get more interesting again as the afternoon goes on. But actually, the whole idea of meeting up with people who are involved in your speciality, having a good detailed conversation, but then getting back and hearing about the other groups. It does feel a really great model, and it's great to be involved in it. I'll probably press the button. So in terms of this East Coast importance for birds, there's probably three key sort of groups of birds we're worried about, and we can celebrate on the East Coast here. We've got the breeding seabirds, the wintering wildfowl and wading birds, and then the breeding birds of the shoreline and wetlands. And obviously these birds are dependent upon all these different factors which we're hearing about through the different talks through the day. But one thing for sure, the East Coast is internationally, globally important for many of these birds. Whether it's the seabirds where I work up at Bempton Cliffs and Flamborough Filey Coast, a bird like the guillemots, over 100,000 guillemots at Flamborough at the moment. It's the largest mainland colony of seabirds. It seems incongruous for such a large, nearly 500,000 seabirds in the summer to be on the Yorkshire coast. But there you go, they're there. It's the perfect combination of cliffs and marine habitat with all the food. And then the other big aspects are the wintering wildfowl and wading birds that come down to the east coast of England and our fantastic estuaries. So the seabirds and the wintering wildfowl and waders, they're the globally important populations of birds where the UK really punches above its weight in terms of conservation. But for our breeding birds of these coasts, they're absolutely a magical part of the coastland, and the initiatives to conserve them are really important, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So, as all, these are the people who contributed to our group meeting, and it was really great to see what chimed between different areas of the coast and what things were new to us. And I think at the moment, a lot of information comes via social media, so we pick up snippets, and sometimes we don't know how true it is. So sitting down and reviewing things of what happened in the past year was a really valuable process. So I've missed out some of the great interesting facts we were told, but hopefully have some of them. Now in terms of protected areas on the coast, this is the SBA network of the East Coast, going down a little bit further south. Probably one thing which is a bit of a gap is how we kind of, for our community of practice on the birds, is how we link up with the North Norfolk side of things as well a bit more, and and where does that boundary sort of begin and end down the Suffolk coast for us, as Jeff was saying earlier. But there's massive protection. It's quite amazing where the outer wash goes to, isn't it, really? I don't know if the town was involved in setting that up in terms of a wash
I've been involved with the SPA, the Great One.
So really all this coast is recognised for its importance to birds, and this process is part of the thing to help get further recognition in the public eye as well. So there's a range of threats to our marine and coastal birds. Climate change, we're hearing about that from people. We'll hear some more about fishing and management of fisheries. For seabirds, bycatch continues to be a problem in UK waters. Birds are caught in fishing nets. Marine and coastal development, many of you will be involved in wind farm development work and how that's being managed and well managed to look after the interests of wildlife while meeting these targets. Disturbance, human disturbance, is such a big impact on the East Coast. There's so many of us going to the seaside. And then for our marine and coastal birds, bird flu in the last 2 years was another significant factor which came out of the blue. Nobody was really been in the geese the year before, and then really hit seabirds in 2022. So a lot of issues going on there. First of all, I'd just like to talk about the coastal nesting birds. And this was really led by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and Sperm Bird Observatory team. and Gibraltar Point as well from Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. But little terns had their best breeding season with over 107 chicks. I think little terns really encapsulate that kind of how much work we need to do to protect rare birds. When you protect little terns, you also get oyster catchers and ring plovers and sandwich terns benefiting as well in places. Down at Gibraltar Point, the last little tern site in Lincolnshire, apparently, which I never realised how perilous the state was in Lincolnshire for little terns. Predation was a big impact there, with 4 pairs just fledgling 4 chicks. When we think about wildlife populations, when you lose them from a region, some birds can colonise quite quickly again, but often you lose these kind of sort of linchpins of populations, and it can take a while for things to ever get back again if they do. So hanging on to populations like this is really important. Bird food really affected black-headed gulls last year, but it was mostly on inland sites, and many of the gravel pit, big breeding colonies of black-headed gulls saw major impacts, which there'll be work to see coming in the future years. And I just want to say about little tern protection, because it's something which has been really great partnership working between a whole range of bodies and often with the councils and such like as well. Little terns, they nest on these beaches which are so popular for dog walking and recreation, and also little terns subject to predation from foxes and other predators at times. So these partnerships where we fence areas off and then warden them, and that direct management by volunteers and staff and teams of dedicated local people results in those successes like we saw at Spurn. And they're just a magic little bird. They really capture the imagination, but they're just kind of coexisting beside thousands and thousands of people walking their dogs on these sites these days. And we really need to try and look after them. On the estuaries, 2023 some really quite positive things. On the Humber, there was over 60,000 pink-footed geese counted. This is kind of quite a change on the Humber from, I think it was 5,000 or 10,000, just 10 or 15 years ago. And numbers have really increased dramatically on the Humber. Also, there was a record count of black-tailed godwits by teams on the Humber of over 7,800. And that's very much linked to good breeding seasons in Iceland, apparently. So the birds are doing well in Iceland at the moment. Down on the north edge of the Wash at Gibraltar Point, the team there saw over 110,000 waders at roost in the winter. And that was over 90,000 knot. And for those of you who haven't experienced the great sort of knot flocks on the Wash, well, you know, me and Tammy want to have a word with it. Because you need to write that, because it's one of those true great wildlife experiences to see those vast swirling flocks. Now, Jeff already covered it a little bit, but there's a great initiative underway at the moment about that overall protection for this network of sites for coastal birds, this East Atlantic flyway. And that's just shows you it's a big effort by lots of people from different organisations to get this recognition and to fight for further protection in the future. And underneath that sort of big scale, there's a whole range of really positive projects going on at the moment. We heard a little bit about Lynx Coast National Nature Reserves and the project work there. There's a fishery management strategy going on for the Greater Wash. There's also a pilot strategy with Natural England on the Humber, and then Natural England are leading on the England Seabird Conservation Strategy. And while out at sea, there's various work associated with wind farm development often, but including the Poseidon project with APMA, who are doing 4 surveys of birds and marine life out in the North Sea each year. You can find that apparently by the Marine Data Exchange. So it's great to see that variety of things going on with various stakeholders along the coast. Now, my speciality is for the seabirds up on the coast, Flandre and Filey Coast. So Flandre and Filey Coast is 20 kilometres of cliff, and it's the largest UK mainland seabird colony. So it's a really significant population. It's there because the cliffs provide the nesting sites and the North Sea provides the food. And so there's 8 or so species of seabird nesting there. You can guess what's most popular. It's those annoying things with the colourful beaks, puffins. But most spectacular are gannets, and most important globally are kittiwakes and guillemots and razorbills, where we have really important populations of these birds to look after. So the SPA, our aim is to really have a robust and comprehensive monitoring programme, which we've had running now since 2009. I don't know why that's signed, isn't it? But basically, population is now counted every 5 years. It's from a boat. Still, we're looking at drones, trying drone usage for population counts. And then productivity over 6 of the species. We have detailed productivity with about 30 people involved in their productivity plots. But we're also interested in other aspects of the ecology. Just look at young gannet for 1 more minute. The diet of guillemots and razorbills, the lifespan of kittiwakes. We've got a project with the Colour Ringing Project, and we're also interested in the winter phenology. Now we look at this. Gannets were massively impacted across their range in 2022, especially to a lesser extent last year. And we're in the process of doing annual gannet counts on the colony at the moment, because to try and assess that impact. And actually, although we've seen, if you look at these green dots, a sort of reduction in 2022, just a little bit of reduction, and actually they bounced back. But actually, when you look at what the trajectory of increase that's been lost there, and this has been seen at lots of gannet colonies, there should have been more birds than what's there. The UK and Ireland holds about 2/3 of the world gannet population, northern gannets, and this year there's a full colony count of all the colonies around the UK and Ireland being organised, which will be fascinating to see what that brings us. Another thing about seabirds is their dependence on food-rich resources within travelling distance of their nesting sites. And there's a lot of work on tracking underway at the moment with most of the RSPB's Conservation Science Department. This sort of spaghetti of squiggles you see is 1 year's data, I think, of kittiwake tracking from 20 or 40 or so marked birds from a few years ago. You can see really they've got about 40-kilometre kind of area to get to, and they need to get their food in that and get back. And that's where we need to really defend them. Now, auks in shore is a real interesting thing which all the group found last year. Thousands and thousands of guillemots and razorbills, also the seabirds, were feeding right on the shoreline, all down the east coast just last year. And it was interesting to hear from Gibraltar Point, from Spurn, and from up our way. And this was linked to enormous aggregations of sprats right close to the shore. So I'm looking forward to hearing the sprat story maybe in the fishery update, because that was just amazing to see. There was also whales coming inshore as well at that time, quite close. And one thing we're seeing, and it links back to those earlier talks, is changing patterns. So over 200 shags going past Spurn from Scottish breeding birds. They were believed to be birds displaced from Storm Arwen in October last year. And there was also, that's birds from the north coming down in a way which I've never been seen before, more than twice the number. There was also impressive numbers of coral shearwaters from the Mediterranean coming into the North Sea from the other end. And these changing patterns are something that we're likely to see a lot more of, and that's where this community of practice and getting together feels really valuable, that we can see the change. And lastly, I just want to say, out in the North Sea, there's been some very welcome news this spring with the UK government closing the sand eel fishery. We know that for birds like kittiwakes, razorbills, almost all of the food chain are really dependent on sand eels out there on the Dogger Bank and on those sandbanks. So that's something, a real positive story of a lot of effort from a lot of conservationists. And I think that's my time.
It is.